So let me get my self-consciousness out of the way. Kathy and Allison know, but I'm having an implant and I have a flipper, and my fear has been it will flip out while I'm speaking. It has not happened yet, but I'm just preparing people just for it. Yeah, it would be. Welcome to the first low-tech class of the Stanford Church of Christ in Aegis.
You know, I've thought lately.
Yeah, but you use a screen. Dale, I really appreciate you normalizing me. Thank you. Thank you. If I have a title for this class, it's called In Their Shoes. And we're going to be reading about Judah and Tamar. It's been one of my favorite scriptures for years, other than the book of John. I think it's a story about character, about power, about resilience, and about who is believed. So what we're going to do is we're going to read first, and then I'd like us to spend about maybe 30 or 40 seconds just letting the scripture sit upon us, then talk about our reactions, and then I have a couple questions that I would like us to have. So Al's going to read verses 1 through 11. Allison's going to read verses 12 through 20, and Chris is going to take us home with verses 21 through 30. Genesis chapter 38. Al?
At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son who was named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law, to raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's household.
After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira the Adullamite went with him. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. He said, what pledge should I give you? Your seal and its cord, and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her.
He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at an end?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said, and she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand, so the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. When his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out and he was given the name Zerah.
Spend about maybe a minute thinking about this story and what jumped out at you. What would you like to comment on? And we're going to go from there.
What's a shrine prostitute?
To my knowledge, it's somebody who is connected to some religion. They have sex, and that money goes to
Okay, so it was.
the temple, as opposed to the church. Val,
Valerie.
you know what, Valerie? I apologize. Yeah.
I feel like I know you went from Lot to Laconia. I, like, after, like, it's probably about a decade ago or more, went from Val to Valerie.
Thank you, Valerie.
No problem. For me, I'm like, there's a lot of sleeping around here. There's a lot of men making decisions about women and women's bodies and who's going to, lie with who and who's going to, there's just a lot of that. So and when you say what stands out to you at first, that's just my normal human reaction to, as you said, the story.
Yeah.
And women really not having a lot of say, but being smart, like, look at these goats and this is the person who slept with me. So like that to me also shows the wisdom of women and
Yeah.
things like that.
Mr. Scott?
Well, first of all, Laconia, I'm really shocked that you would pick a passage about sex.
That's really unfair. But this is a study that I chose when Charles gave us, taught us, and I decided I'm going to go with this because
And
it appeals.
I want to say something that's really broad, and that is that, we only hear the flannel graph stories about
Yeah.
the Old Testament.
Mhm.
That's because it would be inappropriate to tell this story to an integrator. But at the same time, there was no transition ever into these more mature, and I would say complicated stories.
Mhm.
And to me, that's where the real power of some of these New Testament stories is in how messy
Mm.
and how complicated they are.
Agreed. So I'm going to ask you to, I debated whether to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And if it doesn't work, it just flopped. For the women in the group, I'm going to ask you to think to think like Judah in this situation. And for the men in the group, to think and feel like Tamar. So what I'm going to ask is, if you're female, what do you think was going on with Judah? And if you're male, what do you think was going on with Tamar? And how might you have felt? And how would you have responded to what was going on? Gets us outside of our own genders.
Question is, do we think of ourselves as someone who is in that time or someone who is in today's time?
Well, right now, it's in this time and it's in that time. It's both of them. Of course, it's different. I recognize that, but I think it does have a lot of application to what goes on in our society today. I think Valerie pointed some of that out.
Yeah, because the reason why I ask a lot of time, it's easy to be to form an opinion in retrospect. You know what we call it, what Sunday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
We see everything that went wrong yesterday, so it's easier. So whenever I'm called to think of the situation, I try to put myself as someone in that time.
I'm actually asking us to sort of metaphorically incarnate ourselves into these people, to try to get a sense of um, develop a sense of empathy to what they might have felt or gone through.
Oh, I think for me, I'm really struggling with the motivation of either person. But I think the woman in the story, I think for me, like there's she has this promise of marriage from her father-in-law. And I think the motivation for her, if I'm understanding correctly, is like, okay, like he didn't make good on that promise, which is dishonorable. And so she almost like, it's almost like this moment of revenge in a sense of like, okay, well, now I'm gonna trick him and get my due because he didn't make good on my promise, he dishonored me. So I'm now gonna dishonor him. That's kind of what I'm getting as the motivation behind her actions.
Thanks, Chris. Scott?
I'm thinking about how constrained these women were in terms of what their options were. And how really there was no choice in some of these situations, or there was a choice, but it was two really bad choices.
Yeah.
And if I want to fast forward to today, we all live under a culture of constraints. And we all have to make decisions within those constraints. We don't have to, but most of the time we're forced to. And to me, I'm just challenged to think, under what circumstance would you ever say today that a prostitute was wiser than some other leader? And that's exactly what was said here. And we don't have space for that. in our culture. We just want to label people and then keep them plugged into that position, that moral position that we put them.
Mhm. Kathy?
Well, Judah's not really, he didn't start out as an upstanding person anyway, you know, he's just in the previous chapter, he sold his brother
Right.
to, you know, so, you know, Tamar didn't end up in a great family to begin with, but again, limited options perhaps. And, you know, it's just I think sometimes when you read it in its, just in that chapter.
Yeah.
You kind of think, well, okay, so he kind of stands up for himself at the end, so maybe he was an honorable guy to begin with. No, you know,
Mhm.
I think he's not, you know, I think he chose not to give her to his son because he could, you know, because he just like, well, that was a long time ago or whatever, you know, whether he didn't like her or whether it was just a long time ago or something, you know, or better options appealed to him, or
Yep.
he obviously is kind of motivated by money. So, yeah, so I enjoy this. When at one point I was helping somebody prepare for their first communion, and they were like in middle school boy, and they were studying Joseph that time, and they skipped this chapter. And he's like, I don't know what that chapter is about. He goes, because I was reading through, and then they said, not that chapter, but I read that chapter. And, you know, so we had to go in a deep dive
Yeah.
about what that chapter was about. So skipping it didn't really help.
Mhm.
You know, didn't really push it. It called more attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was gonna get their attention
Yeah,
anyway,
right.
you know. Anyway, again, with the adult stories and
You know, I know Debbie knows this. Well, I think we all know it, but um, on the surface, it might have looked like a good family. But man, underneath, they had a lot of crap. And when we look at our families, people look at us, they might see me as having it all together. Boy, I don't feel that way at all. And uh, families got their warts. That's one of the things that this story teaches. It's um, no family is perfect. Men, women, children, whatever. Valerie?
Yeah, I think because you would ask us to look at it, you know, the women to look at it from Judah's perspective.
Thank you, Valerie.
I am trying to, you know, like make sense of it and advocate for myself as Judah. I would say, like in the first part of the chapter, it's really about just making sure that the offspring is there, right? So that's the only reason I'm asking you to do this. And then I'm asking Tamar to wait for, you know, my younger son to grow up when she's good up so that she'll be taken care of. So like that I'm doing all of this while you may view it as not a good thing. I'm really coming from a good place and doing this. But then I'm questioning, so now I have to step out of that. Well, I'll stay in that role. So then when you know, I sleep with who I believe is the shrine prostitute. What is that about?
Yeah.
Like, I guess it's just opportunity or doing something for myself, whereas before I was thinking about family and protecting people, and now I'm just doing something because and I think that's true in life, that people do that we all have things that we are doing that are good and trying to help people. And then there are some things we just do because we want to or because we can.
Claudia and then Debbie.
I was thinking also with him not giving third son, he was protecting his bloodline, meaning the son died, the second son died, now if the third son died, that's where it ends, his bloodline. So he was hesitant to follow that direction that he initially, over the years, I'm not sure what the age difference between them and how much he had to grow up before. He was protecting his bloodline, and as a male in that any male actually in that time period or even now. A lot of people think of, well, who's gonna carry on, and even didn't see that as an option if he had died in the same way as his first two sons did.
Yeah.
So that would end his bloodline.
Debbie?
Yeah, kind of getting out from these comments, he was trying to meet cultural expectations. And it didn't matter whether it was good for him or good for this particular person that he was taking advantage of. There was cultural expectations that he was kind of trying to work with. And part of him, going into temple prostitute was being a part of that culture. So I think try to make a today application from that is like, we probably look at some of the things that we do and we say, well, that's just what everybody does in our culture. Whether it's lying, breaking the law in what we consider some small way, but there's a lot of cultural dilemmas that we find ourselves in, and it's easy to take the easy way out is to go along with that cultural expectation.
Hold on, Anna, and is that Ashley in the back? Who came in? Veronica. I don't have my eyeglasses on. We're in Genesis 38. Okay. Kathy?
If he felt that, maybe Tamar was his bad luck, that's why his sons died and he didn't want the third one to die. I mean, there's a thing that like, I mean, the text says the Lord killed him.
Right.
He doesn't know that. Right. And he's thinking that's why he doesn't want, because to have a bloodline, you would think he would want her to marry or somebody to marry the last one, because you've got to have offspring. But if he thinks somehow she's bad news, then that's the reason why,
Protect his son.
You wouldn't want it.
Yeah. Any men want to take a weigh in on? Oh, Scott did. That's right. Besides Scott, who's half woman himself. Sheldon?
With like what Scott was saying earlier, is not having a choice in terms of like your life, your decisions. So to me, it's very difficult reading this over and over again, thinking it's very, I'm so used to like doing my own thing, making my own decisions, put myself in that role of being, this, I believe the word subservient is not the right word, I don't think, but just not having power, agency in your life, it's really difficult to put myself in that state of mind.
I think what you just said is probably what Tamar felt, that she didn't have agency. She was, as Debbie said, subject to the culture. And he could walk, and he assumed she was a prostitute. They had sex. She gets to cord the signet. And I mean, her resilience in this situation is powerful for me. Kathy?
Yeah, and her risk is great because look at the two options offered to her. Either, now I have my son or child, or you get to die.
Yeah, right.
Those are the things. But also it kind of says the backstory here, she must not have family, like her father must be dead or something like that, because there's nobody that goes to I'm blanking. Judah, and says, okay, you promised your son to her and this didn't happen, because normally that would be the thing, like her people.
If she doesn't have an advocate.
Would put that. So she obviously has no advocate, which is not unusual. People died all the time. So yeah.
Anna?
Well, thinking back to what Sheldon said, this is also very cultural. Back then, you knew your place, and if you didn't stick to it, you got in trouble. Whereas, and I think, especially in America, maybe not having knowledge of other countries really, It's all about, be yourself, be true to you. You do you, it's all about me. And so we're kind of, unless we're different, brought up differently. We're always thinking of what's gonna benefit me, what do I do to save myself? And
Mm.
hopefully we can learn to get out of that mode,
Okay.
but culturally speaking, I think.
Al, did you have hands? And then Guy.
Just, Tamar wasn't a prostitute. She pretended to be one.
Right.
Right. But, and he saw her as,
Any effect on the story?
what do you think?
She's trying to save herself.
Yeah,
How could she be blamed for that
right.
in God's eyes?
And
Well, maybe she could have been something else instead of a prostitute to get away from this wild man.
remember, they have a compact, they have a contract. And he's not filling his end of the bill. And so she says, I got to do something. She hears about him going and she dresses. They negotiate. She gets pregnant and he's good. He sends the goat there or whatever. And then he goes, well, if she's not there, at least I did my thing. And then he wants to kill her. And she says, you recognize this?
But when does he find out she wasn't a prostitute? Did
The
that happen?
point for me is, the point for me is that he had to find out that he was the one who impregnated this woman who he wanted to kill. That's the point. And then he has to look at himself because what he's been doing is looking outside himself. And I think for me as a believer in Jesus, that's what Jesus calls us to do, to look inside ourselves before we look at somebody else. Guy and then Scott.
Yes, that's where the term blackmail come from. Basically blackmail.
Well, I thought you were talking about me.
What I wanted to mention is, from her standpoint, is whatever method she used, but you always have to challenge the system because he would have gotten away with it, even male.
Mhm.
Even if that was none, people would have turned a blind eye, nothing. But she went and challenged that culture, challenged the system in her own way to get justice.
I love that. And she did. Scott?
So I hope I'm not stealing your.
No, this is inductive. So this is fine. We're all teachers right now.
The big aha for me just now was, I mean, when you talked about when did he find out? To me, the big aha is that when we, through righteous indignation, decide to harm someone else, we're actually harming ourselves,
Mhm.
which is really powerful.
That's not stealing. That's teaching. Eva?
When I read this, I am very literal, and there is question, about 3 months later, the word reached Judah that and I am thinking, how? Who told it? Whom? Why would she spread this? So why would she tell anybody?
Mm.
But I guess her whole plot would not work unless someone else knew about it.
Well, for me, maybe she didn't tell anybody, but then guess what happened? She begins to show. And when she begins to show, like Eddie Pleasant will come up to me and touch my stomach and said, when are you due? Thank you, Valerie.
Say something.
But what I'm saying is when she protrudes,
Yeah.
it becomes undeniable. and then the rumors and the gossip, and then Judy hears.
How could I miss that whole point that I went through and she will start showing?
No, but Eva, this is why we have class. Somebody sees a little bit of something that I didn't see. And so instead of one person having all the information, there are a lot of people commenting, and all of a sudden, guess what? You get a better idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wow, you're good. But I'm going to go back to something. I'm going to go back to something because I struggle with this. And since Dale is here, I want to say it in front, not of only of Dale, but we got Kathy, we got Dale, we got Charles. We have a lot of biblical scholars. And we are, I think we're a blessed church because of that. And Scott's a good model for me because when Scott preaches or teaches, he's just Scott. He's not trying to be Dale or Charles or Kathy. And so when I'm dealing with the scripture all week, there's part of me that wants to be like brilliant. And then I just kind of go, the more I try to do that, the more I will fail. What I do is I just like to look at the text, come up with a couple questions. And if we can get into the bodies of these people, maybe we can still get some lessons that Dale, Charles, or Kathy would have led us to, but we do it inductively. And that's why I'm doing it this way. Michael, you had your hands up, or Veronica, and then Valerie.
Say some people learn through stories.
Yeah.
And you are a great storyteller. And I just want to show that. So you're also a great teacher.
You're really trying to make me blush, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Valerie?
So it's similar to Veronica, and I just have to say, as an educator, I really appreciate this way of teaching because it is not just lecture. You, from the start, you said, read the text, take time to think, now respond. And as you said, you throw out some questions. And so to me, that's how students learn. And right now, we are all students. That's why this is called Sunday school. So to me, this is really just like, I'm just so glad that you're here today teaching Sunday school. So thank you.
Okay, moving on. I think I was the butt of a joke. What did she say? Oh, I'm flushingly warm right now. We're coming to the end. One of the, Dee, you're laughing too. I think Tamar has been one of my favorite characters for years, but as I get older, one of the things that jumps out at me in light of present times is a question, who is believed? And especially with sexual assault allegations, there's a tendency to not believe women. I'm not saying that they're all untrue, but I think the default is to not give it the seriousness that it deserves. And that's really not any different than what happened in chapter 38. Judah did not look at Tamar without thinking she did something wrong when in fact he had done something wrong. And I just came across a quote, and I loved it. I'm probably gonna bastardize it, but it says, if you're in a church and somebody makes a complaint and you spend your time on the complaint, you spend your time on the person instead of on the complaint, then you're not in a safe church. I agree with that. And I think this is one of those situations. So I want to say thank you, and we're going to ask Sheldon to say the prayer.
Very
Yes.
quickly, because I do think